Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast, an ongoing series of conversations and considerations to help people understand and embrace their own unique creativity for fulfilling lives and brilliant careers. My name is Ben Talon. I'm an illustrator and author, and I bring 16 years of creative industry experience working with the New York Times, The Guardian, the Premier League, and more. And I invite designers, artists, psychologists, scientists, coaches, athletes, sensitivity experts, and all kinds of thought leaders to help us broaden our knowledge of creativity. Creativity is a fundamental pillar of human happiness, a vital ingredient in the solutions to our problems, but so often misunderstood. The show is supported by founding sponsor and B Corp, Illustration X. Take a look at their stunning range of illustrators and animators at illustrationx.com. If you like the music for the show, it's by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on Spotify and all good music streaming services.
First of all, I'm interested in your title, your current role, specialist in intelligent control of complex systems. Tell me about that role.
Yes, in fact, I am neither urbanist nor architect. My first discipline is mathematics and computer science. In this way, I was professor and researcher for using mathematics and computer science for exploring the presence of multiple systems in the mechatronic way, robotics, the uses of algorithms with electronic for managing infrastructures. For a long time, I have used this discipline, mathematics, computer science, and electronics, for managing, for example, the nuclear power plants or the first generation of drones. And I have started to work in cities by the angle of optimization of infrastructures, lamp post, street lighting, traffic with using technologies, smart red lightings, control of sewages, water, electricity, power, etc. And the intelligent control of complex systems is, in fact, to take the different system present with electronics, algorithm, mechanics, different uses for optimizing with sensors and actuators the use of this kind of elements. In cities, I was one of pioneers in the way of a smart city. A complex system is, in fact, to consider different interdependencies between different elements in a city. In 2000, after the internet, we were among the pioneers until 2010, when this was a big business of big companies developing the smart technological solutions. And I considered at this moment that the promise for solving complex problems in cities, that climate change, poverty, social exclusion, is not a question of technology. Even if we have a really powerful technological development, this is not enough to have algorithms and techno-centered ways. And I prefer to switch from this smart technological solutions towards, in my opinion, the most important point, to develop more and more design of services. How could we improve the quality of life of citizen dwellers in the cities, no longer by more and more powerful infrastructures, but to provide more and more local services for offering a real best quality of life. This was the turning point in 2010 for living from the smart technological city towards a more human smart city at the beginning, more living city after, and to evolve for proposing this polycentric city with the 50-minute city. This was
social relationships, positive social relationships, and community at the very top of what gives me joy. And it's when I'm immersed in those cultures that I am most alive in terms of ideas generation. The necessary human interaction that we all must have, because we evolved in small tribes and groups. And I think that we lose something when, as you have very well highlighted, we have to commute long distances, when cities are designed around motor transport and not human values. And of course, you mentioned at the start the climate crisis, where this is an urgent, we're faced with our own mortality here. And I think that on that on that level, that's obviously critical in your proposition. Is that right?
Yes, of course. When I have decided to turn toward this humanistic urban development, at the same time, in 2010, the Professor Mohamed Yunus, the Nobel Prize, published a book, A World of Triple Zero: Zero Carbon, Zero Poverty, Zero Exclusion. In 2010, very relevant event, given that Professor Yunus was one of the most committed Nobel Prizes for fighting against social exclusions, for developing the new kind of social interactions, for developing more local economical activities. He was the creator of the Grameen Bank, the bank of microcredit, for fostering people with just a few dollars, for going in the way, for creating a communal activity, for going more than assistance to the created added value. And I was totally convinced when I read this book that for cities, we need essentially to develop more local services, of course, for developing more social interactions, for having more vibrant neighborhoods, for developing more friendships, relations, for developing more intergenerational activities, gender equity, etc. This is the social aspect. Of course, I was convinced for a long time that we need to reduce our CO2 footprint, given that in the Anthropocene era, we are the most important contributors of CO2 emission by our lifestyle in cities, and this massive presence of the increase of the CO2 is at the origin of this outstanding risk, not only for cities, but for humanity, with the systemic impact of climate change, loss of biodiversity, rise of sea levels, the heat waves in cities, etc. To stop this globalization, for continuing to import manufactured products without the real concrete local added value. And I said, in fact, that when I proposed after the COP21 in 2016, the COP21 in Paris was in 2015. This was the moment of the signature of the Paris Agreement. I said in 2016 that, in fact, we need three convergent aspects to reduce our CO2 footprint in a more ecological way for having livable cities, to develop a more humanistic social interactions for fighting against social exclusion and to have more vibrant neighborhoods. But there's one, we need as well to develop a more vibrant local economy, local employment for having more viable cities. Livable cities in the ecological way, more inclusive cities in the social positive impact way, a more viable economical cities. Proximity was, at this moment, my common point for developing this convergence to reduce our CO2 footprint naturally when we have the possibility to access to more local services on foot or by bike, for example. In this case, we don't need to use a car. Secondly, with the more vibrant neighborhood, we could create these more friendly relationships, more social interactions in proximity, in particular to use a public space for people in off-road cars, to develop more green areas, to develop more cultural interactions, to develop a new urban culture. And at the same time, to develop more local shops, local commerce, more short circuits, urban agriculture for developing more intensive uses of infrastructures for creating more added value. I have used to propose in 2016 for the first time this concept, 15-minute city. The number of minutes, 15, is not important. The most important point is to develop this polycentric city. Jean Jacobs said a city is alive when anytime, anywhere, we have a multiplicity of choices without having a car dependency. In fact, this is in the 21st century, the Jean Jacobs idea. Anytime, anywhere, a multiplicity of choices without a car dependency for reducing our CO2 footprint.
Well, yeah, I believe that everything hinges on unity and community voice. And I see now, I noticed, in France recently, the rise of right-wing politics. We've had the same thing here in the UK. And I believe that this is a voice of disaffection, of people who do not get the chance to coexist and hear the stories of other people that are different to them. And you mentioned, in the book, the importance of bringing together people from different class backgrounds, because I think this is crucial. I'm from a working class background, and I've been fortunate enough to have a 16-year career as an illustrator and a writer in the creative industries, but this is not common, and most people from my background don't even encounter the creative industry. And what happens is those people feel disillusioned and exist in bubbles. And I think there's no coincidence that with the rise of CO2, there's also the rise of the mental health crisis, the rise of online interactions. I think we need to step back and recognize where we came from. And I think that in this polycentric cities, it fills me with wonder to imagine being back, at a market square. And I love where you mentioned this, leaving the schools open on the weekends for people to come together. I see so many lonely people who, when you think of the rise of the speed of technology, that's going to alienate people who are maybe too old to have used that technology. And so they're walking around the streets alone, and there are people walking around lost in their mobile phones, and there's just so much divide among people. And I just think that the noise of the world is too much. So I think that bringing together people from different backgrounds so they can interact face to face will help to stop this rise of right-wing politics and disaffection. Is that something you also believe?
Yes, you're right, totally right. Really, team, we want to, with the 50-minute city, with the 30-minute territory, with the X-minute city, with this polycentric city. I said very often, we have used to live in a illusory bubble. We have accepted for a long time different bubbles. The bubble of the digital social networks, for example, with a lot of anonymous people, haters, and totally disconnected of the concrete reality. I said that for the first time in the history of humanity, we are massively connected, and at the same time, we are massively social disconnected. We want for that to create in the real life the very concrete social interaction. And at the same time, we have other kinds of illusory bubbles. The modern urbanism, for more than 7 decades, has generated very important segregations. We have accepted to live in a fragmented city. For example, in the modern urbanism, the normality was to have the corporate business district as the essential point for working with the long distances of the residential areas. We have accepted to have this artificial separation based on a business model. The business model of the real estaters was to continue to build massively. For example, the corporate business district, often so far, and with the residential areas, the consequence was this expressway, motor highways, the presence of massive individual cars, the traffic jams, the daily traffic jams, the peak hours, and even including by public mass transportation, because the question is the reason all people should go at the same time in the same slice time from home to a job. I said in my book that we have accepted to live in a city as a giant metronome, early in the morning, early in the evening, disconnected. With the 50-minute city, we wanted to foster against these economical inequities based on the big differences that people who live in a same city, and on the other hand, to fight against the new, too modernist inequities. Their daily time is only for commuting, for going from a home to a job, without the possibility for having useful time for each one of us, for our family, for having the friendly relationships in the neighborhood, for developing more social and more natural relations with public spaces, etc. We need to develop a more massive social mixity, a more massive functional mixity for breaking out this city segregated, fragmented, fractured.
Cars have not gone away. So how do we find a collective voice that because I worry that this will be opposed by the same industries that created the problem in the first place. How do we bring them on board? How do we get past that problem?
Yeah. The development of modern cities at the beginning of the last century, at the beginning of 20th century, was totally intertwined with the emergence of the zonified place for working, for living, and the massive emergence of individual cars. In 1913, when Mr. Henry Ford produced the first Model T of cars, this was the spark for shaping our cities, no longer by the accessibility to the service, but the presence of the materials, three modern materials: concrete and cement for building this separation between the functions incorporated within these residential areas. The second one, cars. At this moment, metals, cars, and oil. In Europe, after the Second War, we have embraced this model. The Athens chart was the predominant model for developing our cities in all Europe and after in all continents. The classical shape of cities with the skyline of the corporate districts, there's amazing infrastructures, expressway, bridges, and the massive presence of cars, the parking in surface, etc., were the strong presence of this paradigm, and the consequence was this loss of humanity. The cars, in fact, were become a social status. Cars were the social hierarchical level. If I have a car, I have a social status. My car is a big car, it's a black car. I am an important person. Cities, they came as well gendered, essentially for men. Cars were at the same time a symbol of a strong masculinity. Cars were at the same time an element of desire. I have a car, I am a man, I have a job. This was an element for continuing to gender a masculine city. We have accepted that for a long time. In the 21st century, when, on the one hand, we needed to understand that we have been living in an unsustainable world, given that we have the unsustainable cities, and in our cities, we live with the unsustainable lives. And it is totally necessary to change in face with the question of global warming, the social tensions by the social exclusion present in our cities, and the presence of a lot of poverty. However, you're totally right, Ben, because the question of the individual car is really always present, even with people that consider that we need to change the shape of cities by the presence of more and more services. If we want to reduce the role of individual cars, they are totally opposed, because for them, a car is a synonymous of freedom. A car is a synonymous of civic rights. A car is really compulsory to have it, to use in all circumstances in my city. I think that in the 21st century, this is a real strategic point to act for changing our mindset in order to consider that it is totally necessary to break out our car dependency. And this is a real challenge. I observed that when I suffered the backslash in UK by the people that consider a car should be present in permanence in a city. And the reality is that with our cities became the cities with a so high density, a car is no longer necessary.
Even when we see the effects in our day-to-day lives, whether we're aware consciously of this or not, when you feel the heat, when you see the heavier rain, and it's right there in front of us, but it's very hard to break these kind of habits. But my life's cause has become champion in helping people to understand the value of creativity and the necessity of creativity in our lives for magic, for feeling of belonging, and for self-expression. And that happens the most when people come together. I tell this all the time to people who have maybe since COVID have remained isolated and stayed indoors, and it goes hand in hand with a global mental health crisis. And just recently I've started looking into the concept of evolutionary mismatch, so looking at the way that our brains and bodies and our lifestyles evolved from being in tribes to the way that we live now. And there are many, many great uses of technology, but I think that staying indoors alone is not one of them. And I think that absolutely vital to solve these collective problems, to find collective voice.
Yes. The COVID-19 was another turning point, given that, on the one hand, for the first time in the modern humanity, we had this planetary pandemic with the same consequences in our cities. This strong isolation, people was blocked by the lockdown, was the only way for limiting the spread of this virus. And the other hand, a lot of people should be changed quickly lifestyle. A lot of people have learned to use technologies for working, for example. At the same time, people have discovered more familiar relationships. People discovered at the same time the existence of neighborhood, a local sociability. Maybe it is possible to take our time, not only for commuting, for working, but to develop, to reviving our social links. After the COVID-19, in particular, for young people, young workers, between 20 years old until 40 years old, this stage of the lifestyle and work style had been continuing to be present in a lot of cities around the world. This is the case in Paris, for example. Even the business model of these business districts is today a risk because workers have preferred today to take 2 days per week for a remote job instead of to go 5 days to a physical presence. With the 15-minute city, we had this possibility proposing a radical change of our cities, no more based in infrastructure, but based in a new social interactions model, a new local economical model. We have, with this polycentric model, the possibility for offering more local services. The idea, for example, to open schools during the weekend. This is an idea for using a public space in permanence, in that this surface closed during the weekend. This is a classical use of the incomplete places. When we have proposed to open the school during the weekend, this is a possibility for offering a creative way. The question is not only to open these surfaces. The question is to say to the different to neighbors, do you have this new public space? Please submit proposals for using differently that a school. A lot of people have proposed different cultural activities, artistic activities, sport activities, food activities, etc. And we said, okay, this is a surface inside the school. In front of a school, we have a street. This street is dedicated for cars. We will transform as well this street in front of the school, no more for cars, but as a mini park for promoting different activities. This was the decision took in Paris by the mayor Anne Hidalgo. And you're right, this is an amazing opportunity for developing creativity, for having a more community buildings, for having more community voices.
Yes, because when you bring all those things together and people feel that they have agency in their lives and they are seen and heard and can speak in person in collective spaces, people become energized. I see it all the time. I see, when I see a young person who's had a tough start in their life, when they find role models and they find a community, a tribe to belong, they're illuminated. I see it all the time, and it transforms people's lives because they want to contribute, they want to share their ideas, and when that happens, I think people are far less likely to take extreme actions, whether that is voting for an extreme political party or getting into trouble, into crime. It is always that's always a kind of cry from the soul that something more wholesome is required. So in terms of your role, Carlos, so this whole concept, but on a global scale, it blows my mind. Like where do you sit in terms of, do you liaise with governments? Are you kind of in the middle of all of this?
Yeah, we are very happy, very, very proud of this development with the 50-minute city around the world. I think that the most important point today for us is, on the one hand, when the local governors have embraced this concept for proposing a new roadmap. In the urbanism in cities, in fact, is to propose the new local urban plan. The 50-minute city with the local governors has a strong impact, not only by the transformations with the moral capability, more local jobs, cultural activities. We are, of course, we are totally involved for that. But the real transformation is when a local governance, a mayor, or president of metropolis, or president of region, has decided to vote a new local urban plan, a new territorial urban plan, available for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, a strategic plan for transforming radically, not only in the short term, but as well in the midterm and in the long term. And for example, in the city of Paris, this was the case. Anne Hidalgo embraced, of course, this concept in 2019 for transforming after the COVID with the different measures, open the schools on the weekend, the street for kids, to transform the corporate business district in a mixed uses, public spaces for more capability, etc. But don't forget that Anne Hidalgo has voted in May 2023 the new bioclimate local urban plan for the city of Paris. This was the case, for example, in Scotland. The Scotland Parliament has voted in February 2023 the new strategic framework, the fourth framework, called 20 minutes territory framework for all Scotland. I went to Glasgow recently. It was a very nice surprise when I discovered 1 year after this vote, the new guidance urban plan in Scotland for concretely implement this program of the 20 million neighborhood in different cities. And I said that this is possible in all cities, in all territory. This is just a need of a political will. In Australia, Melbourne, this is the same thing. The Melbourne city and the Victoria State both have voted each one this strategic program. And today we have created with the International Organization of Mayors, C40 cities, the most important global network of metropolises for fighting against climate change, UCLG, United Cities and Local Governors, the oldest organization of mayors, UN Habitat, United Nations in charge of cities, and my team, the Global Observatory of Sustainable Proximities, for creating a place, a worldwide place for federating, for gathering the different cities, mayor, local governors in order to exchange the best practices, to foster more and more local governors for embracing this concept, for hearing people, for hearing voices, for fostering to create more community buildings, more collective voices, given that we need the involvement of the citizen participations for increasing the quality of life. We need to switch on the comprehension of the quality of life to integrate that the quality of life is no more to continue to accumulate material resources for living, not as a number producers of materials, so in the economical performance, but this complete human with the ecological, economical, social interactions. And I am very happy because we are one of the contributors today in this way. It's not really easier because, unfortunately, we have been living today in a world with more and more radical alt-right forces. But this humanistic way is a humanistic way for this low level, the level of cities, different of the level of countries. And I hope that with this transformation in cities, maybe we will contribute to change the mindset for having more open-minded people. cities are the places for having a strong proximity. We are the possibility for discussing with a lot of different people on the streets, with the neighborhood, with the intergenerational people, with the women, men, etc. We could develop this kindness, this otherness. But we need for that a leadership. We need to identify voices with this capability for generating trust.
And you make me think of two things there, which one is something that George Monbiot, the writer, said. He said that what we need is to move towards private sufficiency, but public luxury. So, instead of people boxed in tiny flats and somebody else in a mansion down the road with lots of land, we need to see big grand parks that everybody can access with, where we much like you said about the school. I think that's a beautiful idea.
One of the point of public spaces for social interaction is the randomized effect. The name was the return on collisions. People, when have the possibility for being in an open public space, we could increase the rate of physical interactions for generating a friendship, for generating the new relationship. The public space is very important because this is one of the places when we could mix a lot of different people with the origin totally different in all kinds of origins, and to generate this social interaction. One of the difficulties today, for example, is the majority of couples have today as the starting point in a relations social networks. The different apps, Tinder and others, are the most used. But in general, for a long time, the public spaces, the randomized meetings were a real possibility for regenerating this different quality of meetings without an homogeneous category, social category. And this is so important today. And for that, we need to continue to insist on the importance of proximity with the more public space. When people have used a car, this is impossible to generate physical interaction, a social interaction in a car.
It's a beautiful thing. I had it in art college, I had it at university, I had it in sports clubs. I've been fortunate to have a lot of that in my life, and I attribute a lot of my happiness today to that belonging. And I've always had these good physical interactive networks, and it's something I want my children to place great value on too. But let's hope with your work that we can start to see that for many more people.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for the quality of your question and reflections. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Ben.
The pleasure's all mine. Take care.